Hey, everybody, it's been a wild week of racing. And up next on BobkeTV is the Broom Wagon, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the final Ardennes Classics, Tour of the Alps, etc., etc., Neutral Zone News. Got some more Musette musings, and of course, the ever popular tweet of the week. All of that on the Broom Wagon. Okay, everybody, let's get right into the racing. I have my notes here, so if I avert my gaze from the camera, I'm just reminding myself, even though I have a pretty good idea of what happened last week. One of these days, I'm going to memorize the whole Broom Wagon show and just let it fly. But until I'm that good, please bear with me. Astana still on fire, following up Michael Valgren's win, very impressive win in Amstel Gold Race. The Astana team has been on a tear in the Tour of the Alps. Pello Bilbao wins stage 1, Miguel Angel Lopez stage 2, and Luis Leon Sanchez 3 stages. And here is all of those highlights, including Luis Leon Sanchez pointing to the sky for Michele Scarponi. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they were just best of friends, and 1 year since Michele Scarponi was killed out training, getting ready for the Giro last year in a collision with a car. Good news for Dimension Data, only their second win this year. Ben O'Connor, who wound up finishing 7th in the overall standings. So Ben O'Connor, a name to be reckoned with in the future, and comes up with a very impressive stage win against some of the very best bike racers in the world, including Chris Froome. More on Chris in a minute. But the most impressive rider in the Tour of the Alps was Thibaut Pinot. Very consistent, always right there with the first finishers, and comes up with an impressive GC win, his first win of 2018. And so, chapeau, as they say to Thibaut Pinot. And Chris Froome, 5th overall, not disastrous, not as impressive maybe as we're accustomed to seeing Chris coming into this part of the season. It is stage race time, and for Chris Froome, the Giro d'Italia starts in just a few days. And maybe he was holding back in the Tour of the Alps, not wanting to show himself, which would not surprise me one bit. And that he'll be at his best in the Giro and be a very hard man to beat. So in spite of the fact that Chris was not dominant, was not smashing off the front of every stage in the Tour of the Alps, I think he will be, pre-race wise, the hot favorite. And we're going to get into something that's come up in the press recently about Chris Froome's participation in the Giro in a little bit in the Musette musings. But we'll stick to the good, the bad, and the ugly for the time being. I'd like you guys to write down this name and keep note of it. Egan Bernal is a rider I asked everybody to pay attention to starting last fall. But Ivan Sosa, another young Colombian, looks to be as quick in the mountains as anybody on earth. And keep an eye out for him. He finished ahead of Froome on the stage 2 mountain summit that was won by another Colombian, Lopez. So Colombians have so many strong riders now. We're going to be talking about them a lot. I'd like to go to some of the bad. Here is a quick video of a 90-degree turn just past the finish line that Nicolo Bonifacio had to negotiate right after he won the stage. I mean, it's a good bike handler, there's no doubt about it. The sprinter's generally pretty solid in the bike handling stakes, but the race organizers cannot have a barrier, an end of a roadway basically, that close to the finish of a sprint stage. It's mountaintop, no problem. Sprint stage, come on. One thing I've noticed is that the Tour de France has done their best, even though it's not always that consistent, to provide a safer race course for the riders. At least it's a part of their agenda, but many other races along that, in that that the riders do, especially when they're first starting out, smaller races like the Tour of Croatia. The safety standards are not there. So, and here is another example of a ludicrous 180-degree turn on a sprint stage in the Tour of Croatia, less than a kilometer to go. First guy in line. First guy, and then it's just bowling pins. Oh my goodness, come on. You can't have that in a pro race anywhere in the world. And if you do, that's what's going to happen. So if you survive all of those very dangerous scenarios in cycling and get to the Tour de France, then maybe at least safety will be a part of the agenda. But getting there is just incredibly hard. Konstantin Zivsov won the overall, so congratulations to Konstantin. And let's hope that there's safer finishing scenarios for the entire sport of cycling, and that the officials on site are able to collaborate with the race owners and directors for a safe finish, and that what they say has to be implemented, or the stage is canceled. If they have to move the finish line to where that 180-degree corner is in this example, then do so. I mean, obviously, there's an incredible amount of complications with urban infrastructures, but still, you got to have a safe race course for the riders, or our sport will not be able to develop at the rate that it should. Let's move on to Fleche Wallone, and a brilliant win by Julian Alaphilippe to wrestle the stranglehold that Alejandro Valverde has had over Fleche Wallone was very, very impressive by Julian Alaphilippe. He was the best. His team was phenomenal. We saw him in the Tour of the Basque Country in a stage race to get ready for a lot of riders, the Ardennes Classics, just rampaging off the front on the previous BobkeTV broom wagon. And so I'm very reluctant to ever bet against Alejandro Valverde in the Fleche Wallone. But Julian Alaphilippe won. Valverde was second, by the way. That was an impressive ride by Alaphilippe, and maybe a little bit of disappointment for Alejandro Valverde. But Alaphilippe was not to be denied in Fleche Wallone. This is an interesting video. He thought that Nibali was still off the front, didn't see him getting caught. So maybe a little bit less pressure, and he would just, I'll just go for second. And they had to tell him that he won, and he just absolutely can't believe it. So that's, even the pros don't always know what's going on. Here's some bad. Dan Martin. Dan Martin has had the most blighted spring of his career. He came home, he was 61st, almost 10 minutes down at Fleche Wallone. And one of the outside favorites. I know he's incredible on steep uphill finishes. For his weight, the watts he makes is really, really impressive. His team was on the front for many miles, and just bad luck in Fleche Wallone. He didn't crash, but he was caught behind a crash, slowed down, and was unable to contend. And we'll get to some more of his bad luck at Liege-Bastonge-Liege in a minute. Also some bad, the Lotto Soudal squad, not able to communicate adequately, and they found themselves in a position where Tim Wellens and Jelle van der, teammates on Lotto Soudal, were not on the same page tactically. Tim Wellens believed that Jelle van der should have been racing for him. Jelle van der seemed to be sort of in his own world and was racing for himself, and just probably heat of the moment in the front group, whether or not he knew Tim Wellens. His progress in the race course has not been revealed, and also Tim Wellens has backpedaled a little bit from his comments criticizing Jelle van den Dert's tactics during the race. But Van den Dert wound up third, and so not a horrible result for Lode Soudal, who's had an excellent spring also, in spite of the fact that their number one, I don't know if you could say number one rider, Andre Greipel, most certainly is one of their stars, out with the injury. I think way back in Milano San Remo, broke his collarbone. So I'm sure that the gorilla will be back racing soon. The women's edition, Anna van der Breggen makes it 4 in a row. And this one was maybe the hardest fought of her run at Fleche Wallone so far. And Megan Guarnier also had a great race, almost stole the victory away from a small group from the breakaway at the bottom, and she was the last survivor of that and still held on for 3rd place. So an impressive ride by the American, Megan Guarnier. But Anna van der Breggen prevailed, probably week in and week out, the number one women's racer on the planet in 2018, which she has been for the last couple of seasons. So congratulations to Anna van der Breggen for her 4th win in Fleche Wallone. And it's the type of race where the rider that's good at that very steep ramp to the finish line has an exceptional chance at winning multiple times, because it's not a lot of tactics. It's a war of attrition to the bottom, and then boom, the strongest rider wins. And we've seen that in the men's edition with Alejandro Valverde, perfect for his talents, many years. So Anna van der Breggen, I guess, is the women's equivalent, dominance-wise, of Alejandro Valverde. So, but it's great to see Megan Guarnier, who had a pretty tough 2017, racing at her very best, and it's awesome to watch the women race, and the speed that they go on the final climb. I don't think it's very much slower than the men. So congratulations to Anna van der Breggen, and more on the good from Anna in a moment when we get to LBL, Liege-Bastonge-Liege. So Liege-Bastonge-Liege, Fleche Wallone on Wednesday, Liege-Bastonge-Liege on Sunday. And Quick Step won on Wednesday in the men, and Quick Step won again, on Wednesday, and won again on Sunday with Bob Jungels, the current champion of Luxembourg. And it was an impressive performance by Bob Jungels physically, and another impressive performance by Quick Step tactically. They have realized that towing some of the other stronger riders closer to the finish line in one-day races, like Peter Sagan, like Greg van Avermaet, will not work out in their favor, especially considering the level of talent in their roster. And so attacking a long ways from the finish line has proven to be, throughout the year, 26 wins going into Liege-Bastonge-Liege, and Jungels makes it 27 on the season. And going into that, with Alaphilippe, with Philippe Gilbert, with a new name, Max Schachmann, that we've talked about earlier on BobkeTV, going from a long ways out and putting the pressure on the other teams to do the chasing of very powerful riders like Bob Jungels has become incredibly successful. And when the roster was reduced from 8 riders to 7, that made that was the difference. It seems like a slight difference, but it's a huge difference for the success of the Quick-Step team. Because if you have 7 riders to chase and one leader, it's a little bit different than when you only have 6 riders to chase for 1 leader. And the natural attrition of the race uses up a lot of the teammates of the big stars. And also a part of this is budget and recruiting. A guy like Max Schachmann is a good example of how intelligently the Quick-Step team finds the up-and-coming riders. I don't know how they do it, but they have a great recruiting program on Quick-Step, and when they start sending guys off the front, it's a question of the other teammates waiting, sitting on the wheels and waiting for the chase to unfold. if they catch one guy, like Philippe Gilbert, for example, was on the attack, and then Bob Jungels goes, and then Julien Alaphilippe is sitting on the wheels, it makes for a very long day for anybody trying to beat Quick Step in professional cycling this year. So Bob Jungels, probably the biggest win of his career, and that might launch him. He's been solid in the Giro. He's led 2 different editions for a few days, I think. Got a stage win there. He's been 3 times the national champion in the time trial and the road race for Luxembourg. So he has good results, but this is massive. Liege-Bastonge-Liege, one of the monuments, falling to Bob Jungels and Quick Step. Whew, what a year it's been. I predict that they'll continue to win throughout the season. They'll probably have 50 wins by the end of the year, which is what most teams get in a decade. So great riding by Quick Step. I'd like to also say Michael Woods from the EF Education First Team, which was Cannondale last year and the year before, had a fantastic ride. He might have let Bob Jungels go, and that was maybe a tactical error. And if Michael Woods had have gone with him, I think he might have beat him in the sprint. Also the bad luck again for Dan Martin, puncturing in Liege-Bastogne-Liege. And Dan Martin cannot get a break this year. This is the finale in the closing miles of Liege-Bastogne-Liege. Bodies everywhere, cars everywhere. Had to get wheel change from neutral support. It was the front wheel, but at that point, it's so deep into the race, and it's blowing apart at the front. Bob Jungels had already attacked and was gone. But Dan Martin, a ruinous spring. Bad luck. He had good legs. It seemed like good fitness up there, but just couldn't get a break. And he was one of the few riders still attacking at the end of Liege-Bastogne-Liege. So terrible luck for Dan Martin. He'll want to put this season spring campaign behind him as quickly as possible. Also, there's a corner out on the course, and if you watched our broadcast of Liege-Bastogne-Liege on NBC, you would have seen Larry Warbasse come to grief on an obstacle that should have been, there should have been a marshal. They put a hay bale there, so they realized, the race promoters, that it could be dangerous, and around a blind corner, a bollard in the middle of the road with a hay bale, but no marshal. The first rider went through there, almost crashed. Was chased by the 3 other riders from the breakaway. They all had to weave and bob and get around it as best they could. And so when the field gets there a minute and a half later or so, it's going to be mayhem. And that's exactly what happened. Larry Warbasse on the receiving end of bad luck because of that. And there has to be a time when the UCI starts to impose penalties on races on behalf of the riders, on race organizers that don't provide the racers with a safe course, as long as they do everything in their power to assure that, and having a marshal there would not have been that difficult. And it continues to plague cycling, and it's going to, cycling's evolution, development, growth, and attractiveness to sponsors will continue to evolve until those conundrums are solved. It's not easy. Europe, when I was racing, had a fraction of the road furniture that they have now. And I mean, obviously, the designers of the infrastructure of the highways and byways in Europe have a lot of challenges. Bicycle traffic, pedestrian traffic, automobile traffic. And it's the automobile traffic and keeping automobile drivers safe that has absolutely changed the landscape that the riders race on. Every level of the sport, both men and women, every length, every type of race, it's impossible to find. And you know, you're in Liege-Bastogne-Liege, you're talking about nearly 270 kilometers of open road. So it's like half the eastern side of Belgium. And you're going to have crazy traffic furniture and consequently bad luck situations for the riders. All right, everybody, that's it for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Next up, Neutral Zone News. First off, in the neutral zone news, I'd like to offer my condolences to the family of Andy Reese, who's passed away this week. He was the sponsor of the BMC squad, one of the most passionate, one of the most knowledgeable, one of the most dedicated owners of any franchise in any professional sport, and cycling will really miss the enthusiasm and the patronage and the passion that Andy Reese brought to the sport. So my condolences to his family and his extended family at Team BMC. Here's a good one, everybody. I mean, it's not enough that cyclists face all kinds of obstacles when they're racing. But this news report is incredibly disturbing. Apparently, a young cyclist from France, Clement Delcroix, out on a training ride. Car passes by very quickly, very quickly, and he hears a pop, and then he just is racked with pain in his shoulder. Stops, tries to assess what just happened, and realizes, and he's bleeding profusely, realizes he's been shot. Goes to the emergency room with the help of some motorists that did stop, and the doctors find a bullet in his shoulder, and he didn't take notice of the car, just out on a training ride, and it's just, I mean, at a certain point, parents will not let their children compete in bike races or ride bikes. It's just, and this is France. I mean, I'm speaking to the choir, but I'm preaching to the choir, excuse me, because I'm pretty sure we all ride, or at least are aware of cyclists, would never hope to ever be involved in anything like this. And everybody out, you know, I don't even know what to say. It just, you can wear your helmet. You could, I mean, body armor. I don't know how uncomfortable would that be to go on a bike ride with that. But let's hope that Clement has a quick recuperation and is not too freaked out to continue his career as a cyclist. I don't know. I can't even imagine if I was that age. If I was that age, I would have and I'm trying to think of myself. If I was out on a training ride and got shot for no reason, just absolutely no reason, it would be tough. I might not be sitting here. I might not have been able to become a professional cyclist. So let's hope that Clement gets back out there, and this does never happen to anybody again. Man. Marco Haller, Marco Haller, one of the lead-out men for Marcel Kittel on the Katusha team. Marco Haller, out on a training ride with Bernie Eisel and a couple of items from Bernie Eisel. Oh. Out on the training ride, they go through an intersection that they don't have a stop sign, go through, and a car blows through the stop sign. Bernie barely misses it, and he wails into Marco Haller, broke his kneecap in 2 places and his femur. Ooh, man. Oh. So he's going to be out for a number of months and won't have a chance to race in the Tour de France, apparently. And Marcel Kittel will be down one man in the lead-out train. So it's just, it's so dangerous riding bikes. It is incredibly dangerous. I'm not likely to stop right now, but I don't know. Reporting on these, I might ride a lot less. I might start mountain biking exclusively. At least then, when you wipe yourself out, you did that to yourself, and it wasn't because of a car. And Bernie Eisel barely misses that. Obviously stops to help Marco get to the hospital, to the emergency room. A couple days later, he's got a hematoma on his brain and had to have surgery that was sustained in a crash where he broke his wrist and obviously concussed at the Tirreno. Man, cheating death twice. Let's hope both these riders have a speedy recovery, Marco Haller and Bernie Eisel, and that drivers stop trying to wipe us out. I don't know. We last week absorbed the passing of Michael Golertz, young Belgian rider, just 23. Two more cyclists have also had heart attacks and passed away, and Brian Van Borg, an ex-pro, cardiac arrest, but was saved, was attended to in time, and survived a very serious cardiac episode. A lot of people ride and race bikes. You know, a lot of people that don't have nearly the same lifestyle that cyclists have also succumb to cardiac arrest and cardiac incidents and death by heart attack. But it seems like a rash of these, and I'm going to withhold judgment unless there's another one, unless there's another heart attack that results in death in the very near future, or in the in the future that is recognizable. And then it would not be unfair to speculate that something is going on. But at this point, I think it's just the law of averages. And also, one thing we need to keep in mind is that if anything happens across the globe to a cyclist, it generally makes headlines somewhere, and that's picked up, and that is the ripple effect of social media. It's pretty remarkable and pretty ferocious, and so we hear everything. So it might be that we hear these stories more often, and it seems like they're more concentrated. But what I recommended in Michael Golart's case is a stricter protocol that the UCI has in place to monitor the health of the riders, not just their hearts, but, you know, in Bernie Eisel's case, obviously bleeding from the brain for 6 weeks, undiagnosed, and had to go in for emergency surgery. And he was lucky to survive that. It could have been a lot worse. All right, everybody, up next, Musette Musings. Luis Garcia del Moral, Spanish doctor, if I'm not mistaken, lifetime ban because of his involvement with the U.S. Postal systematic doping program. But he's had an interview recently, and he was the medical director of Spain's national track cycling squad between 93 and 98, and has gone on record as saying he was encouraged to and administered a comprehensive doping program for all the Spanish athletes in the track program at the 96 Olympics and the years before and after that. I'm assuming that that's not the case with the Spanish Cycling Federation anymore, but, you know, if you saw Icarus, if anybody out there saw Icarus, we came to understand more clearly the government-sponsored, the Russian authorities sponsoring a systematic doping program for their Olympic athletes. So we're talking about 93 through 98, and the Russian doping program going on at least through the Sochi Olympics. I'm reluctant to speculate that has been dismantled, that because they've never admitted any wrongdoing. They're trying to pretend that's just a rumor. And even in spite of a ban on their athletes by the IOC, at least representing their country, instead of being the Russian Olympic team, they were the Olympic athletes of Russia at the recent Winter Olympic Games. But when a government sponsors a doping program for its athletes, it's hard to imagine that the anti-doping movement having enough sophistication and funding to be able to adequately battle against that. So, man, we're talking about 20 years ago, 1998. And as I said before, it's my belief that the sport has evolved way beyond that. And it worries. If it doesn't worry you, let me know. Go to the comments section. If that doesn't worry you, I will be surprised. Or, I mean, at a certain point, you just have to suspend your idealism and hope that what you're looking at when you watch a bicycle race is authentic, is the natural talents of the riders involved. I'm going to continue to believe in that because I know a lot of the professionals, and I do believe the majority, including the ones that I have a chance to talk to and know pretty well, are racing clean. But we'll see. A few more systematic doping programs that are exposed, and I will maybe change my tune. But for the time being, that's what I'm sticking to. All right, everybody. Up next is a tweet of the week. Last but not least, the tweet of the week coming to us from Joey Roskop. Joey just competing in Liege-Bastonge-Liege. Turns out that the KMs, the kilometers, fly by in Liege-Bastonge-Liege until you get dropped. Then they creep. Very, very true. Been dropped many times in my career. Been dropped many times after I stopped, and many times currently. It's nearly a daily occurrence, and it's true what Joey says. When you're racing, the intensity, the bodies around you, the miles just fly by. And even if you're only going slightly slower, when you get dropped, it seems like it takes forever to get to the finish line or wherever you're going for that matter. That's a good one. That's a tiny little window into the life of professional cycling. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Please go to the comment section. Please keep it nice and clean. Commendable effort in the comment section. Got hundreds of comments and very few opportunities necessitated by cleanliness that I had to do too much editing. So thank you guys very much. Until next time, see you out there.